In the cold void of space, the Grand Council's flagship, Dominion, loomed like a silent predator waiting at the edge of the Sol system. Within its command center, a cavernous room clad in dark obsidian and pulsing blue lights, the mood was tense but expectant. Commander Eli Voss stood at the forefront, his gaze fixed on the holographic star map projecting Earth in real time. His weathered face, marked by years of stellar combat, gave nothing away as he observed the blue orb with a strategist's calculating eye. Beside him, various officers manned their stations, their movements precise and deliberate, ensuring no energy was wasted. Every action was streamlined, echoing the gravity of their mission. "Initiate communication link," Voss ordered, his voice devoid of emotion yet carrying an authority that resonated through the quiet buzz of the operations deck. A junior officer nodded, fingers dancing quickly over a luminescent panel. The room dimmed momentarily as the main screen flickered to life, displaying the diverse members of the Galactic Council, each a representative from a different star system, their visages serious and expectant. Voss's eyes narrowed slightly as he prepared to deliver the message that would set the tone for interstellar relations for generations to come. "Counselors," Voss began, his tone even, "the time has come. Earth has defied the treaties, expanded beyond their decreed boundaries. Today, we correct this course." On the screen, the counselors exchanged quick glances, their faces an array of colors and textures that no human art could replicate. Yet none dared to interrupt. The weight of Voss's reputation preceded him. "We have deliberated," continued Voss, his hands clasped behind his back. "The verdict is unanimous. Earth will submit to the Dominion Accord or face immediate enforcement." The words hung in the void, stark against the silence that followed. Back on Earth, inside a nondescript facility buried under layers of rock and secrecy, General Arjun Patel watched the transmission, his jaw set in defiance. "Prepare our response," he said quietly to the aide beside him, his voice steady. "This isn't an ultimatum we accept. It's a challenge we will answer." As the link closed, Voss turned to his second-in-command, his expression unreadable. "Ensure the fleets are ready. I do not expect compliance. I anticipate resistance." "Yes, Commander," replied the officer, his response crisp, his demeanor showing respect but not submission, a perfect reflection of the role he played. As Voss gazed out at the stars, his thoughts were not on the looming battle but on the outcomes. Peace through strength, he mused, was not just a strategy, but a necessity. Earth would learn this in time. As the transmission from the Grand Council ended, General Arjun Patel's determined strides echoed sharply through the underground command center. The stark white LED lights overhead cast a sterile glow on the metallic surfaces, a stark contrast to the dark, foreboding atmosphere that enveloped the room. "Let's get to work," Patel said, his voice resonating with urgency as he approached the central strategy table. The holographic display flickered to life at his touch, revealing a detailed layout of the solar system interspersed with potential defensive positions and rendezvous points for their fleet. Around him, the air was charged with a mix of anxiety and resolve from the assembled staff, each member keenly aware of the stakes. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the subtle hint of electronic equipment overheating, a constant reminder of the relentless planning that had been ongoing. "Sir, our outer satellites have detected increased activity near Mars," reported Lieutenant Hawkins, his tone tinged with concern as he handed over the latest data slate. The cool surface of the tablet was a minor relief to Patel's tense hands. Patel glanced at the information, his eyes scanning quickly. "Redirect our mobile units to form a defensive perimeter. Use the asteroid belt as cover. We won't strike first, but we'll be ready if they do." "Yes, General," Hawkins replied, his fingers swiftly moving across his console to relay orders. Meanwhile, Patel turned to Dr. Emilio Marquez, the Chief Technology Officer, who was adjusting the sensory feedback from their deep space probes. "What's the status on the EMP charges?" "We've rigged the satellites around Jupiter's orbit. Any unauthorized entry will trigger a pulse to disable their navigation," Marquez explained, the light from his screen casting blue highlights on his focused face. "Good. Keep monitoring any shifts in their approach patterns. We need to be adaptable," Patel instructed, tasting the lingering bitterness of his morning coffee as he spoke. In a quieter corner of the room, Communications Officer Jaden Smith adjusted the frequencies on his console. The soft clicks of the keyboard were nearly drowned out by the low discussions of strategy around him. His task was crucial, maintaining an encrypted line of communication across Earth's defenses without alerting the Council to their plans. As the team worked, the scent of rain seeped in from the ventilation. The brief storm above ground a stark contrast to the dry tension below. Patel allowed himself a brief moment to savor the earthy aroma, a reminder of the world they were fighting to protect. "General, we've got a response from the lunar base," Smith called out, his voice cutting through the murmur of activity. Patel approached, his gaze fixed on the screen. "On screen," he ordered, and the message from Earth's moon base appeared, coded and cautious. "We stand ready to support. All measures in stealth mode activated. Awaiting further instructions." Patel nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "Tell them to initiate Phase 2 at my command. It's time to show the Council that Earth isn't just defending, it's setting the stage for a counterstrike." With every officer's eyes on him, Patel's command resonated clearly. "Prepare all units. This isn't just a battle, it's our statement to the universe." As General Patel's voice reverberated through the command center, setting in motion the gears of war, the energy shifted from one of preparedness to imminent action. Earth's strategic bases, scattered like hidden gems across the rugged terrain of the planet and its celestial neighbors, now buzzed with a silent but palpable urgency. In the sprawling underground base beneath the Nevada desert, the air was thick with the scent of molten metal and the sharp tang of electrical discharge. Sparks flew like miniature stars as welders fused armor plating to the hulls of the interceptor drones. The ground vibrated subtly under the weight of massive machines being prepped for deployment, each tremor a drumbeat in the symphony of war. Captain Marcus Flint oversaw the loading of photon torpedoes, his presence a calm epicenter in the storm of activity. "Check every seal, test every circuit," he commanded, his voice a steady force. "What we do in the next few hours could change the course of this conflict." Nearby, engineers calibrated the sensory arrays of the drones. Instead of the usual buzz of machinery, there was a hushed efficiency to their movements, their tools clicking and clacking in a rhythmic dance of precision and focus. The faint scent of lubricant mixed with the sharpness of cold metal, creating a mechanical scent unique to spaces like these. Elsewhere, at the lunar base in Mare Tranquillitatis, the mood was equally charged. Dr. Liam Jung, a specialist in gravitational weaponry, adjusted the settings on a device that could, in theory, turn the tide of battle. His hands were steady, but his brow was furrowed, the weight of potential outcomes pressing down like the heavy lunar gravity outside the thin walls of the base. "The calibration is complete," Jung reported over the comlink, his voice echoing slightly off the bare metal walls. "The field generators are operational. We can create a gravity well strong enough to disrupt their advance, but timing will be everything." Back on Earth, General Patel absorbed the updates, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and scenarios. He turned to his communications officer, a thin line of determination set upon his lips. "Coordinate with all units. Once we engage, there's no turning back." The preparation spread beyond the confines of military bases. In hidden bunkers and secured rooms, the leaders of Earth's governments watched, waited, and planned. Their discussions were not of fear, but of fortitude, the kind forged in the crucible of necessity. As night fell, the stark contrast between the dark sky and the glowing screens in the command center painted a picture of isolation and connectivity, a planet united under the banner of survival. Patel stood by the main viewport, his reflection a ghostly overlay on the serene image of Earth hanging in the void. "We are ready," he whispered to no one, the words a vow made to the stars. As he turned back to his team, his face was a mask of resolve, the plan set in motion now irreversible. With Earth's response in full swing, the silence of space above belied the storm to come. The stage was set, the players ready, and the universe watched in bated breath as the first act of Defiance began to unfold. As Commander Voss pondered the unsettling silence enveloping his fleet, The Silent Wings cruisers slid through the asteroid belt, their shadows mingling with the rocky fragments floating in space. Aboard one such vessel, Captain Lydia was acutely aware of the pivotal role her crew was about to play. Her ship, a sliver of darkness among the stars, approached the Council's defensive perimeter, invisible to their sensors. "Steady," she whispered, the soft echo of her voice barely reaching the ears of her focused crew. The bridge was steeped in a cool darkness, illuminated only by the soft glow of navigation displays. The taste of mint from her earlier gum lingered in her mouth, a small comfort against the dry, recycled air that filled the space. Meanwhile, General Patel's voice crackled through the comlink. "Confirm positions. Initiate Phase 2 on my mark." His directive cut through the silence like a knife, sharp and clear. Back on Earth, the command center was a hive of quiet activity. Screens displayed real-time data feeds, the gentle tap of keyboards punctuating the air. Officers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of determination and anticipation. The scent of coffee wafted from a corner machine, a mundane anchor in the sea of high-stakes strategy. In space, the cruisers adjusted their trajectories minutely, their movements calculated to avoid any detection. Captain Lydia's hands were steady at the control, her senses attuned to the slightest vibration from the ship, each one a potential harbinger of discovery. "The Council won't know what hit them," murmured her second-in-command, his voice a hushed undertone. Lydia nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Let's keep it that way. Ready the EMPs. As soon as we're within range, we strike." The moment stretched, taut as a wire. The cruiser edged closer, slipping past giant asteroids that masked their approach. Every second was a dance with fate, each silent maneuver a step closer to their goal. Back at the Council's flagship, Voss turned to his chief strategist, his intuition gnawing at him. "Deploy additional scans. Focus on the asteroid belt. I want every rock out there accounted for," he ordered, the steely edge in his voice betraying his growing unease. On the Silent Wings, Lydia received the go-ahead from Earth. "Execute Phase 2 now," she commanded, her voice resolute. The ship shuddered slightly as the EMP charges were deployed, invisible waves of disruption cascading towards the unsuspecting Council fleet. As the first waves of the EMP hit, the lights on the Council's ships flickered, screens went blank, and the artificial gravity wavered. Confusion reigned as alarms remained silent, their circuits fried by the pulse. On Earth, Patel watched as the Council ships lit up their screens, markers of chaos rather than control. "Maintain pressure. This is just the beginning," he stated, his voice firm, betraying no hint of the strain he felt. In the vast, cold expanse of space, the balance of power subtly shifted. The Silent Wings, now ghost ships in the truest sense, moved to their next targets, their presence felt only through the havoc they left in their wake. The silent war had begun, and its echoes would soon be felt across the galaxy. In the void of space where the stars stood as silent witnesses, the aftermath of the EMP strike left a haunting stillness. Captain Lydia, aboard the Silent Wings, observed the chaotic yet silent disarray among the Council fleet through her scanners. Iconic ships adrift, their usual sync lost to the shadows of confusion. "Move to the next waypoint. Keep emissions low and eyes sharp," she instructed her crew, the muted clink of her seatbelt echoing slightly in the hushed ambiance of the bridge. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council's flagship, the situation was dire. Commander Voss paced the command deck, his face a mask of contained fury and concern. The usual vibrant screens now flickered sporadically with static, their reliable glow replaced by the intermittent twitch of emergency lights. "Restore main power. Manual override if necessary," Voss barked, his voice carrying the weight of impending dread. His footsteps resonated against the metal floor, a stark contrast to the usual hum of activity that once filled the war room. Back on Earth, in the underground command center, General Patel monitored the unfolding chaos with a stoic expression. The sharp tang of ozone from overheated consoles filled the air, a stark reminder of the technological warfare being waged. "We've got them reeling. Deploy the second squadron. Target their auxiliary ships. I want no ship capable of a counter-offensive left functional, Patel commanded. His fingers drummed against the cold console, a rhythmic testament to the escalating tension. Above Mars, the second wave of Earth's tactical fleet surged forward. The sleek vessels, designed for both stealth and aggression, maneuvered through space with a grace that belied their deadly intent. Their approach was silent but deadly, much like the vacuum of space that enveloped them. In the ensuing chaos, a faint but discernible pattern began to emerge among the Council's fleet. Despite the disarray, a few ships managed to regain some semblance of control, their movement suggesting a rallying point. Captain Flint, observing from the USS Vanguard, caught the subtle cue. Looks like they're trying to regroup near the Titan belt. We can use this. Set a course. Prep the kinetic bombardiers. We'll hit them at the rally point, Flint strategized, his voice a low growl that resonated with cold determination. As the Earth's fleet converged on the rallying point, the space between the stars was no longer calm, but a silent storm of strategic positioning and imminent confrontation. The kinetic bombardiers, loaded and ready, awaited Flint's command, a silent threat poised against the cold backdrop of space. With a simple nod, Flint unleashed the fury of Earth's arsenal. Bright streaks of kinetic projectiles cut through the dark, each one a silent harbinger of destruction. As they struck the Council's ships, the impacts were visible only as brief flashes of light, explosions muffled by the vacuum, but devastating in their effect. On the Dominion, Commander Voss watched helplessly as his fleet became ensnared in Earth's tactical web. The taste of defeat was bitter, a stark contrast to the usual metallic tang of victory. He knew this battle was a turning point, one that would dictate the tempo of the war. As the Earth forces regrouped for another assault, the mysteries of their next moves hung in space like the stars themselves, each one a story yet to unfold. The kinetic bombardment rippled through the Council fleet, sending silent shockwaves through the black void. Shattered hulls drifted in slow spirals, their once imposing silhouettes now fractured relics of the Council's former dominance. Fire flickered in ruptured sections, spilling vaporized metal and dying plasma into the abyss. On the USS Vanguard, Captain Flint leaned forward, his fingers tightening against the armrests of his command chair. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. "Minimal. No casualties. Their counteroffensive is still disoriented," an officer confirmed, his hands deftly navigating the display. Flint exhaled, the cool, recycled air doing little to temper the heat of battle still pumping through his veins. "Maintain pursuit," he commanded, his gaze fixed on the drifting remnants of the Council fleet. "They're not running yet. They're stalling." Across the void, the Dominion reeled from the assault. The taste of scorched metal clung to the recycled oxygen in the war room, where Commander Voss stood rigid, his eyes locked on the damage reports flashing red across his screen. His fleet was unraveling. "Emergency protocol, Theta," he ordered, his voice quieter now, coiled with a new, unspoken calculation. His chief strategist hesitated. "Commander, that would—" Voss turned, his gaze sharper than any reprimand. "It will buy us time. Do it." With a reluctant nod, the officer relayed the command. Across the Council fleet, dormant subsystems flared to life. Automated distress beacons transmitted jumbled signals, mimicking the chaos of a total systems collapse. Certain ships powered down completely, their energy readings vanishing from enemy sensors. The battlefield, once an organized map of tactical movements, now twisted into a web of deception. On the Vanguard, Flint's brows furrowed as half of the enemy ships flickered off the grid. The readouts wavered, feeding false data to his systems. "They're scrambling their signatures," he muttered. Aboard the Lunar Command Center, General Patel analyzed the tactical feed, the glow of holographic projections painting his face in sharp contrast. His eyes tracked the shifting energy signatures reading between the chaos. He exhaled through his nose, a quiet acknowledgement of the Council's strategy. "They want us to waste our firepower on ghosts," Patel murmured. He tapped the table, his mind sharpening around the flaw in their opponent's move. "They're hiding something in that wreckage, something they don't want us to see." The Silent Wings cruisers had remained undetected, circling the battlefield like unseen predators. Now, with a simple command, their trajectory shifted. In coordinated silence, they descended upon the floating debris fields, their scans peeling back the layers of deception. Inside the wreckage of what appeared to be a ruined dreadnought, a single power signature pulsed faintly, too weak to be noticed by the Council's enemies, too calculated to be accidental. On the Vanguard, Flint received the encrypted ping from the silent wings. His pulse quickened. They're moving something out of the wreckage, he realized aloud. The war had just taken a darker turn. Inside the shattered carcass of the dreadnought, something stirred. A single energy signature, weak but deliberate, pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The Silent Wings cruisers, cloaked in shadow, adjusted their scanners, their crews silent as they watched the data unfold. Captain Lydia's fingers hovered over the controls, her eyes locked onto the readout. "They're not retreating," she murmured. "They're extracting." Aboard the USS Vanguard, Captain Flint analyzed the transmission from the stealth ships, his mind racing through possibilities. "They're pulling something out of that wreckage," he muttered. "Something they were willing to lose half their fleet to protect." In the Lunar Command Center, General Patel tapped the screen, magnifying the debris field. Among the drifting husks, one vessel remained eerily intact, a sleek obsidian construct with no identifiable markings. Its surface absorbed the light rather than reflected it, a void among wreckage. Patel's voice was measured, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "That's not one of their standard ships." Flint nodded grimly. "It's something else. Something they never meant for us to see." On board the Dominion, Commander Voss stood before his strategic display, the artificial glow painting his features in sharp relief. His hands clenched behind his back as he studied the extraction progress. "Are they in position?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. His chief strategist hesitated. "Nearly. But their cloaking won't hold if we—" Voss turned, his expression carved from stone. "No more delays. Activate the failsafe." Across the battlefield, a ripple of energy surged outward. The wreckage, once drifting in silence, began to detonate in calculated succession. Blinding flashes erupted as entire sections of the field were consumed in fire and debris. On the Vanguard, alarms blared as proximity sensors triggered. Flint shielded his eyes from the sudden burst of light. "They're covering their tracks. Whatever was in that wreck, they'd rather destroy it than let us get near." Aboard the Silent Wings, Lydia cursed under her breath as the ship shuddered from a shockwave. "They just turned the entire battlefield into a smokescreen." Her pilot adjusted their course, weaving through the expanding storm of shrapnel. But amidst the chaos, a shadow moved. The obsidian ship was no longer adrift, it was accelerating. Patel's voice cut through the encrypted channel. "Track it." Flint's grip tightened around his console. That ship wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The Silent Wings cruisers locked onto the fleeing vessel, their system struggling to keep up with its shifting signature. It darted between the flaming wreckage, weaving through the debris field with unnatural precision. Lydia's pulse quickened. They've got more than a ship. They have something inside it. The revelation settled like a stone in Flint's chest. The Council hadn't just been buying time. They had been protecting something far worse. Patel exhaled slowly. Then it's not just a battle anymore. It's a race. The obsidian ship cut through the wreckage like a predator slipping through tall grass. Its surface warped the surrounding light, bending shadows as if space itself recoiled from its presence. Whatever the Council had been protecting, it was inside that vessel, and it was running. On board the Silent Wings, Captain Lydia tracked its movement, her eyes darting across the shifting data streams. It's fast, faster than anything they've fielded before. The pursuit was a game of calculated aggression. The stealth cruisers twisted through burning debris, their hulls brushing dangerously close to jagged remnants of shattered warships. Sparks flared as fragments scraped against reinforced plating, sending tremors through the decks. On the USS Vanguard, Captain Flint's pulse drummed against his ribs as he studied the obsidian ship's trajectory. It's heading for deep space, but it's not random. There's a point of rendezvous. General Patel, watching from Earth's command center, narrowed his gaze. "Intercept before they reach their fallback position. We can't let them disappear." The Silent Wings adjusted course, their movement surgical. The lead ship launched a predictive strike, a streak of energy slicing through the void. It detonated ahead of the obsidian vessel, forcing it to veer sharply. For a split second, its cloak flickered, revealing a glimpse of its true structure, sleek, unnervingly organic, as if grown rather than built. Lydia's breath hitched. "That's not Council design." Flint's voice was steady, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "Then what are we chasing?" The obsidian ship retaliated. From its underbelly, a burst of violet energy lashed out, twisting unnaturally as it moved, as though space itself shuddered under its weight. The lead Silent Wings cruiser took the brunt of the blast. Its shields flared, a crackling web of resistance, but the ship spiraled violently, its navigation struggling to recalibrate. Inside, Lydia gritted her teeth as the inertial dampeners strained to counter the impact. "That wasn't standard plasma," she hissed. Flint's jaw tightened as he watched the attack. Number that was something else entirely. On the Dominion, Commander Voss stood motionless, eyes locked on the battle feed. His strategist shifted uneasily beside him. "They're adapting faster than expected," the officer muttered. Voss exhaled, slow and measured. Because they weren't meant to fight. They were meant to escape. Back in Earth's war room, Patel ran a diagnostic on the energy signature. The readings were erratic, refusing to conform to any known profile. He tapped a finger against the console, deep in thought. "That's not Council technology. It's older." A realization settled over the room like a cold shadow. The Council hadn't been protecting a weapon. They had been guarding something buried in their past, something they had no control over. Flint's grip on his console tightened. "If they're running from it, we need to catch it." The obsidian ship accelerated again, vanishing into a nearby gravitational well, and Earth's forces followed, chasing a secret the galaxy had long buried. The obsidian ship vanished into the gravitational well, its warped silhouette swallowed by the sheer force bending the fabric of space. The Silent Wings cruisers followed in pursuit, their systems compensating for the sudden shift in inertia. The void twisted ahead of them, pulling like an unseen tide, dragging them toward the unknown. Captain Lydia's fingers danced over the controls, stabilizing the ship as data flickered across her screen. "Trajectory shift detected. They're not moving randomly," she murmured. Aboard the USS Vanguard, Captain Flint leaned into the holographic display, watching the shifting readings. The gravitational pull was unnervingly precise, not chaotic as expected from such anomalies. "They're using it as a slingshot," he muttered. General Patel, his gaze sharp, analyzed the same data from Earth's war room. "If they're navigating this with precision, it means they have a destination. Find it." Back in space, the Silent Wings recalibrated, their sleek forms skimming the event horizon as they locked onto the obsidian ship's aftertrail. Space distorted, stretching and twisting with unnatural grace. The darkness ahead felt less like an absence of light and more like a threshold into something ancient. Inside the obsidian vessel, unseen hands, or something like hands, moved swiftly, manipulating controls too fluid to be mechanical. Pulses of energy rippled through its core, patterns shifting as though alive. Whatever they were carrying, it pulsed in tandem with the ship's movement, synchronized, as if it knew it was being hunted. Then the void spat them out. The gravitational anomaly relinquished its hold, expelling the obsidian ship and its pursuers into an unfamiliar sector. The stars here were wrong, older, dimmer. A scattered field of derelict ships drifted through space, their hulls scarred by time rather than battle. This was not a battlefield. It was a graveyard. Lydia exhaled sharply, scanning the wreckage. "What the hell is this place?" Flint's sensors lit up with erratic energy readings. "This isn't a random escape point. They came here on purpose." On the Dominion, Voss stared at his own navigation reports, his expression unreadable. "They've reached the exile field," he murmured, his strategist tensed. "Then they know." Voss turned, his movements slow, deliberate. "Not everything. Not yet." Back on Earth, Patel's analysts scrambled to process the information streaming in. The graveyard of ships wasn't just ancient, it was impossible. Some of the vessels bore markings of species that had never been recorded. Others displayed technology that should have never existed. One wreck, larger than the rest, loomed in the distance. Its surface was intact, untouched by time, as though it had been waiting. Inside the obsidian ship, the crew moved with a quiet urgency. The artifact pulsed, its light bleeding into the very walls, feeding on something unseen. It had come home. Lydia's breath hitched. Something's waking up. And across the void, the wreckage stirred. The void crackled with unspoken tension as Earth's fleet reorganized, maneuvering through the ancient battlefield with precision. The wreckage was no longer a graveyard. It was a war zone waiting to reignite. Captain Flint absorbed the new data, his jaw tightening as he studied the shifting formations on the holomap. The obsidian ship had reached the largest derelict, and something within it was coming to life. General Patel's voice carried over the encrypted channel, calm but weighted. "We need to control the field before they use it against us. If the Council still has hidden assets in this sector, they'll leverage the wreckage for cover and flank us before we get a clean shot." Flint nodded. "Understood. We set the terms of engagement. No drawn-out fights. Fast, coordinated strikes. If they turn this place into a bottleneck, we're finished." Aboard the Silent Wings, Captain Lydia was already preparing their next move. "Their ship is using the derelict as a shield. We can't just blast through. It'll be a waste of ordnance and give them time to reinforce." Flint's mind raced, considering every angle. "We force them into motion. If they're stationary, they're confident. We take that confidence away." Patel's voice cut in. "Use the debris. Make it a weapon." Lydia caught on immediately. "If we manipulate the field, we can turn it into a kill zone. Controlled detonations, gravity tethers, use the wreckage as moving cover and shrapnel." Flint's lips curled into a grim smile. "Agreed. Deploy mines along the major approach vectors. Set up controlled collapses on the most intact structures. When they move, they get funneled into our kill box. Orders spread through the fleet like wildfire. Automated drones scattered through the wreckage, latching onto derelict hulls and planting precision charges. Engineers aboard the Vanguard calibrated gravity wells, ensuring they could pull debris into the enemy's flight path at a moment's notice. On board the Dominion, Voss narrowed his eyes as his analysts fed him new projections. "They're shaping the battlefield," one of his officers muttered. Voss exhaled sharply. "Let them. It means they expect us to follow their lead." The obsidian ship pulsed with erratic energy as it interfaced with the ancient wreck. Across the graveyard, dormant systems flickered awake. Unknown scripts ran across broken displays, translating languages lost to time. Lydia's fingers twitched on the controls as her scanners detected the shift. Something's feeding off the wreckage. It's not just a ship, it's a conduit. On Patel's display, a warning flashed. Unidentified energy surge detected. Pattern inconsistent with known Council technology. Flint's voice cut through the channel. "We need to trigger the field collapse now, before whatever's inside wakes up." Patel hesitated, studying the readings, then gave the order. "Set it off." Across the battlefield, the mines detonated. Controlled gravity wells snapped into place, yanking wreckage into deadly spirals. The battlefield reshaped itself in seconds, turning from a graveyard into a trap. The obsidian ship shuddered. Then, for the first time, it screamed. The battlefield was unrecognizable. Where once stood an ancient graveyard of forgotten warships, now only shifting wreckage remained, spiraling through space like jagged remnants of a shattered empire. The obsidian vessel, once untouchable, now lay crippled within the debris, its core pulsing erratically, struggling against the gravitational collapse that Earth's forces had orchestrated. It had run out of time. Captain Flint stood at the center of the Vanguard's bridge, his gaze locked onto the broken remains of the Council's last desperate gambit. His voice was steady, cold. "Patch me through to the Dominion." Static flared, then cleared. The face of Commander Voss appeared, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, The Council's war room flickered with damaged systems, sparks trailing like dying embers. His empire was falling apart in real time, and for the first time, there was no arrogance left in his stare, only the hollow realization of inevitable defeat. Flint's voice carried no triumph, only truth. It's over. Voss exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening against the edge of the console. You have no idea what you've done. Flint didn't blink. I know exactly what we've done. We've finished what should have never begun. Voss let out a low, bitter chuckle, but there was no fight left in him. You think you've won? Flint's tone sharpened like the edge of a blade. We didn't win. You lost. The words landed heavier than any weapon could. Voss knew it. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something unheard, watching the unraveling of centuries of dominance. The silence between them stretched, thick with history and consequence. On Earth, General Patel stood before the war table, the tactical feed illuminating the hard lines of his face. His officers waited, the weight of the moment pressing down like a storm on the horizon. We end it here, Patel murmured, his voice carried across the room, final, unwavering. No council, no second chance. They will remember Earth. Flint's eyes never left Voss's as he spoke the last command. Fire. Across the battlefield, Earth's fleet unleashed their final strike. The silent wings detonated their remaining payloads, precision missiles streaking toward the fractured Dominion. The Vanguard released its kinetic lances, weapons designed not to explode but to tear. The obsidian ship, once a whisper of unknown power, cracked under the assault, its core splitting like brittle glass. Voss let out a breath, his final one. The Dominion collapsed in on itself, vanishing into fire and metal. The last council that had dared to demand Earth's surrender was no more. Flint watched as the wreckage drifted, its remnants scattering across the void. He exhaled, slow, measured, the weight of history settling into his bones. Patel's voice came through the channel, quiet, certain. Message received then. Flint nodded once, loud and clear. And the galaxy listened. The wreckage of the Dominion drifted in silent ruin, the last remnants of an empire that had once ruled through arrogance and fear. Earth's fleet lingered in formation, their dark silhouettes etched against the cold light of distant stars. The battle was over. The war had been decided. Captain Flint exhaled, his fingers loosening from the armrest of his chair. The silence in the Vanguard's bridge was thick, not with uncertainty, but with something heavier, finality. General Patel's voice crackled over the secured channel, steady as ever. Status report. Flint's gaze remained locked on the debris field, the shattered bones of the Council's once mighty fleet scattered like dust. No survivors, no reinforcements. It's done. A pause. Then Patel spoke again, his words slow, deliberate. Then let history mark this moment. Captain Flint stood at the center of the Vanguard's bridge, his gaze locked onto the broken remains of the Council's last desperate gambit. His voice was steady, cold. Patch me through to the Dominion. Static flared, then cleared. The face of Commander Voss appeared, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, the Council's war room flickered with damaged systems, sparks trailing like dying embers. His empire was falling apart in real time, and for the first time, there was no arrogance left in his stare, only the hollow realization of inevitable defeat. Flint's voice carried no triumph, only truth. It's over. Voss exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening against the edge of the console. You have no idea what you've done. Flint didn't blink. I know exactly what we've done. We've finished what should have never begun. Voss let out a low, bitter chuckle, but there was no fight left in him. You think you've won? Flint's tone sharpened like the edge of a blade. We didn't win. You lost. The words landed heavier than any weapon could. Voss knew it. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something unheard, watching the unraveling of centuries of dominance. The silence between them stretched, thick with history and consequence. On Earth, General Patel stood before the war table, the tactical feed illuminating the hard lines of his face. His officers waited, the weight of the moment pressing down like a storm on the horizon. "We end it here," Patel murmured, his voice carried across the room, final, unwavering. "No council, no second chance. They will remember Earth." Flint's eyes never left Voss's as he spoke the last command. Fire. Across the battlefield, Earth's fleet unleashed their final strike. The Silent Wings detonated their remaining payloads, precision missiles streaking toward the fractured Dominion. The Vanguard released its kinetic lances, weapons designed not to explode but to tear. The obsidian ship, once a whisper of unknown power, cracked under the assault, its core splitting like brittle glass. Voss let out a breath, his final one. The Dominion collapsed in on itself, vanishing into fire and metal. The last council that had dared to demand Earth's surrender was no more. Flint watched as the wreckage drifted, its remnants scattering across the void. He exhaled, slow, measured, the weight of history settling into his bones. Patel's voice came through the channel, quiet, certain. "Message received, then." Flint nodded once, loud and clear. And the galaxy listened. The wreckage of the Dominion drifted in silent ruin, the last remnants of an empire that had once ruled through arrogance and fear. Earth's fleet lingered in formation, their dark silhouettes etched against the cold light of distant stars. The battle was over. The war had been decided. Captain Flint exhaled, his fingers loosening from the armrest of his chair. The silence in the Vanguard's bridge was thick, not with uncertainty, but with something heavier, finality. General Patel's voice crackled over the secured channel, steady as ever. "Status report." Flint's gaze remained locked on the debris field, the shattered bones of the Council's once mighty fleet scattered like dust. No survivors, no reinforcements. "It's done." A pause. Then Patel spoke again, his words slow, deliberate. "Then let history mark this moment." Across the galaxy, the news would spread like wildfire. The Council, the so-called pinnacle of interstellar order, had fallen not to another empire, not to infighting or time, but to Earth, to the species they had mocked, dismissed, threatened with extinction. Captain Lydia's voice came through next, low but edged with something unmistakable. "They thought they were teaching us a lesson. Turns out we were the ones giving the final exam." Flint allowed himself the faintest smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And they failed." In the command center on Earth, Patel turned to his officers. Some stood in stunned silence, others clenched their fists in quiet vindication. None celebrated. There was no need. The message had been delivered, and the galaxy would never forget it. Patel turned back to the transmission. "What about the anomaly, the ship?" Lydia responded, her tone measured. "Gone. Whatever it was, it died with them." Flint's eyes flickered toward the remnants of the obsidian vessel, now little more than a smoldering husk. He wasn't sure if that was true. Some things didn't die. Some things waited. But it wasn't Earth's problem anymore. Patel straightened. "Pull our fleets back. We don't need to hold this ground. Let the ruins speak for themselves." One by one, Earth's warships peeled away from the battlefield, leaving the dead to the void. The stars bore witness as the victors departed, not as conquerors but as a warning. In the years to come, they would tell stories. The empires that had once laughed at Earth would whisper about the day the Council fell. They would speak of a war fought not for conquest, but for survival. And they would remember the lesson written in the wreckage: Earth does not kneel. Earth does not surrender. Flint sat back in his chair as the Vanguard turned toward home. His hands, steady as ever, rested on the controls. "Think they'll try again?" Lydia asked quietly. Flint glanced at the shattered battlefield once more before shaking his head. "Not in our lifetime." And as Earth's fleet vanished into the void, the stars carried their legacy forward. The last council that had demanded Earth's surrender had become an example.